Hi guys, in today's video we're going to be painting an Orc grot tank from start to finish. But first of all I want to say a huge thank you to VMS Supplies for sending me out some weathering products that we use heavily in this tutorial. If you check the description box down below you'll find a direct link to VMS Supplies web store where you can actually check out all the products that they sell that I've used in this video and more besides. The plan with this tutorial was to paint the tank as effortlessly and as quickly as possible, but to get a really nice result. Here you'll see that I'm zooming in on the tank and showing you that using the pigments with some of the coarse texture from VMS Supplies, we can get some really nice realistic texture and rust on the vehicle very quickly. Okay guys, as always this is going to be a long video, so please go get comfortable, grab yourselves a nice hot drink or maybe my favourite, an ice cold beer, and we'll get started with the tutorial. I'll start off by priming the Orc grot tank with Alclad 2's Lacquer Primer White. I say this in all my videos guys, but it's very important that I do say this. You have to be very well ventilated and wearing a respirator if you are actually going to use Alclad lacquers. Also they're known as a hot liquid. What this means is that if you have an airbrush with rubber seals it will damage the seals and damage your airbrush. So make sure your airbrush has PTFE solvent proof seals if you're going to use this primer. If you can't use this primer, then I highly recommend Badger Stynylrez primers, which can be used in any airbrush and are also very good. Here I'm priming the miniature at about 20 psi and about 3 to 4 inches away from the model. Now I'm going to start base coating the model using Vallejo Game Air Magic Blue. Again I'm working at between 17 to 20 psi on the miniature when spraying, and I'm working at 3 to 4 inches away from the model, and I try to keep the airbrush moving as much as possible so we don't build up too much paint in any one spot. Now we're going to highlight the tank using Vallejo Game Air Electric Blue. I aim for the centre of panels and try to leave the magic blue behind in areas where I think natural shadows and shading would form. Now we're going to create chips on the model using Vallejo Game Air Charred Brown. We use some blister sponge that you get in some miniature packs here, and I remove most of the paint on some paper towel, and then you can see that I'm just looking for areas where I think rust would naturally gather on the vehicle. So extreme edges of panels and anywhere you think rust would form. Now we're going to use Spot On Pigments by VMS Supplies, and we're going to be using the Dark Rush with zero texture. We're going to be using ENML2 binders, and this is the standard matte variety, and we're going to create a wash. So I add the pigment into a little thimble, add the ENML binders 2.0 and create a wash, and as you can see I'm going around all the recesses of the vehicle with that wash that I've just created, and this is going to leave some really nice panel line washing behind, some really nice looking rust effects, and it's really simple to do. Now we're going to start adding some rust texture to the vehicle using dark rust with zero texture, and we're going to use a neutral pigment which has no colour to it, which is pigment texture in the coarse variety, and we're going to mix it, as you can see here, with the coarse texture and some of the dark rust into a little thimble here. And I'll add some enamel or ENML binders 2.0 to this mix, and we'll mix it all around, and then we'll have a very textured pigment mix. We want to create a really thick paste, so if you add too much of the ENML binders 2.0, which I have done here, you can add some more texture and some more dark rust and thicken it up again, which I'll do in a moment. Here you can see that it's a little too thin as I apply it to the vehicle, and I'm using a brush that's a little bit too big, but I'm working for speed here. You can take your time and use a much smaller brush here and build up an even more realistic result. Here you can see that I'm adding some sponge chips onto those rust areas that I've just added, just to make them look a little smaller. So I'm just coming in with Vallejo Game Air Electric Blue. Now we're using the pigment texture coarse again, and we're going to actually create a mud texture. So here you'll see that I've added the coarse texture, and we're using EU Dark Earth with zero texture, and we're mixing it together on this paint palette here, and we'll add some of those ENML binders 2.0 in the standard variety matte, and we're going to start putting the mud pigment mix onto the tracks. And here you can see that I'm just applying it to all of the areas of the lower hull where the track assembly is. As you can see, I'm adding the mud texture to the tracks as well. Now we're going to use EU Brown Earth with zero texture, and we're going to mix it with a texture coarse pigment, and we're going to apply it dry to those wet tracks that we just applied mud to, and this is going to really bulk up the texture and look like realistic mud. Now we're going to use fresh rust, and again this has zero texture. We're going to make sure that we add some ENML binders 2.0 to a little thimble, and we're going to create a wash, and we're going to add the light rust in selective areas where I think rainwater would be recently on the tank and it would leave to a lighter rust colour. Now we're going to use ENML 2.0 binders in the gloss action variety, and we're going to create some rain or watermarks on the actual mud, again creating even more texture and adding a really nice effect. I have to add, before I did this, I actually airbrushed the VMS Supplies matte varnish all over the tank to just make sure that all of those pigments were sealed in. So make sure you matte varnish the whole vehicle before you add the gloss effect, otherwise it will be lost if you do the matte varnish at the very end of the vehicle. And here we have our finished vehicle. I added some Vallejo Game Air Wolf Grey to all the white glyphs, and I added Vallejo Metal Colour Gunmetal Grey to all the metallic areas, but everything else I showed in the tutorial, guys. I really hope you like this tutorial, and I can promise you, if you actually use VMS Supplies products, you'll find how simple and easy and fantastic they are to use. Again, I want to say a huge thank you to VMS Supplies for sending me all the pigments and the auxiliary products like the binders out for review. And thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, guys. And I'll catch you in the next one.